All right, guys, I got an amazing discovery for you today in this video. I'm back. Like I said, I'm going to do videos. So this one's really cool, and I think everyone should see it. It's going to be a faith builder, which I really want to do for people. I want to help them build faith. Things of spirituality, things of the Creator and God, sometimes it's just hard to wrap your mind around because your mind gets in the way. Okay, but you can look outside and look at all the things that are made, right? Not on accident. Your eyeball's pretty crazy itself, the way it works. Let's get into this. First of all, God works through people that really don't want to do it all the time. Okay? The prophets didn't want to be prophets. Their jobs were tough. Okay? If you know your Bible, then you'll know some of the stories in there. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is we can go with Moses. We can go back as far as Noah too. But Moses, he was chosen to get the Israelites out of Egypt. And whenever he was confronted with the task by God, he said, "Who am I that I'm going to go to the Pharaoh and get the Israelites out of slavery? You know, I can't even talk very well. Who am I going to say sent me to do this?" Right? So he was not up for it as much as you might think. We can go to Abraham. He was called out of Ur. He was called out of a pagan place to be a separate people and become many nations. Fast forwarding to Jesus himself, he came out of Nazareth, and everyone at the time said, "What good can come out of Nazareth?" Right? And when he went to choose his disciples, he chose fishermen, average guys that could be taught, right? Teachable people, not puffed up religious men. And so, with that said, God uses those types of people, right? People that don't always want the job, people that don't think they can do the job, but he brings out the gold in them. Because we all know who those people are to this day, right? And they had doubts in themselves. So don't have doubts in yourself. So this brings me to my story. There's a man named Wyatt, and he's been around since, he was around, but through the last few decades, he was doing a lot of archaeological work, biblical archaeological work, just on his own with his sons, his two sons. This is a guy who was a nurse anesthesiologist. He would save up money, and then he would go to the Middle East. He'd go to Israel, and he'd take the Bible as a map, and he would just explore, right? And he found so many awesome discoveries. To name a few: Noah's Ark, the real Mount Sinai, the remains of Sodom and Gomorrah, and even the Red Sea crossing underneath the water of the Red Sea. But there's one discovery I want to hone in on today to get some faith building thoughts in your brain. He found some blood, and we're going to talk about that blood right now. He was actually in Israel, and he was going to be doing a certain search for something that he was looking for, one of the biblical events, whenever he was sidetracked by the Spirit, actually, very interesting story, to go on a search for the Ark of the Covenant. And during that time, in the depths of these caves that he was digging in, he looked up and saw a black remnant through a crack in a ceiling, in the ceiling of the rock. I'm not going to get into the Ark of the Covenant where he was to, but we'll do that in another video, or you might find it whenever you start digging after this. So fast forward, he saw a black substance in the crack of the ceiling, and the rocks were just rent. They were just cracked up, and he had an assumption in his head that could be blood, right? From all the knowledge of history and Bible, he thought that. Him and his sons went up and above that area where they were, and they actually found 3 holes in the ground, spread out where an execution stake would be slid in, right? From the top into the ground like a cross. And so where those holes were, there was plugs. They were plugged up with something. I don't know if it was wood or stone. I think he has the plug in his possession today, or the family does. And so inside that plug hole was a black substance that went down following into the crack, okay, of the ground, which is an amazing thing. So what he did was he scraped some of the black off of the hole, you know, with the assumption or the theory in his head that it could be ancient blood. And he put it into a black film container, those old film containers before digital cameras, you know. And he took it to an Israeli lab, and he told them, "Look, I want you to test this out and analyze it, and I want to be there when you do it." And so they said, "Okay, sure, we'll do that." And they let him stay there. And they said, "Okay, Mr. Wyatt, this is human blood." But before that, they told him that it's dead blood, so you can't revitalize dead blood. You can't, wake it up or anything. And Ron said, you know what? I understand, but just please, would you do it for me? And I'd like to be there and watch. They said, okay, we'll do it. They analyzed it. He asked them to put it in a saline growth medium and swirl it around gently ever so often. And when they finally checked it again, they said, Mr. Wyatt, this is human blood. He said, they told him, this blood's alive. And they couldn't figure it out because it was so old. The Israeli lab tech said, whose blood is this? And Ron Wyatt just came to tears, or he comes to tears when he tells the story. And he says, this is the blood of your Messiah. The blood had 24 chromosomes. It had 23 from the mother, and it had 1 from an unknown father, not of this world. And usually we have 46 chromosomes, but this showed that it came from a human mother, not earthly human father. Okay. I'm recording. Can you give me a second, please? Okay. I need you to leave me alone. Go back. And so what happened next was I started getting all kinds of distractions because this is the truth, and that's what happens. It was life-changing for those guys, and Ron tells the story about it. I'm going to put that clip in here now because I know that most people haven't seen this, and most people aren't going to see it unless I'm, as a friend, bring it to them and say, hey guys, check this out. It's like me and you watching a video together, right? I could show it to you, you can see it, and then we can discuss it after that. So I'm going to insert a clip here.
Good evening, Ron. Thank you very much for all three. For seminars, wonderful, thank you. My question is that you said that you had the blood of our Lord examined by the Israelis.
That's correct.
What was their determination of that?
Okay. Now, we won't be able to take second questions. I'm sorry if you're on your second one, please just step out. I love you, but we're running out of time. Real quickly, okay. Dried blood is dead blood. Everybody knows that, all right? They can test the blood of the pharaohs, the mummies of the pharaohs, all right? There's certain things they can do. They cannot get a chromosome count by any method I'm familiar with, all right? Things keep changing. I don't profess to know everything. However, there's no way I know that you can get a chromosome count out of dead blood. You can get a DNA and some other things, but not a chromosome count, all right? That's done by living white blood cells. Now then, first of all, in this analysis, I took the blood into a laboratory in Israel. I asked one of the people I work with in antiquities, where is a good laboratory that does reliable work? And they said, such and such, such and such. I took it. I just said, please examine this blood and tell me what you can tell me about it. All right? They said, well, look, we're going to reconstitute it. We're going to put it in normal saline and keep it at body temperature for 72 hours with gentle swirling. All right, that's their business. That's great. I said, now I want to be there when you check it out. They said, fine. So I was back. They checked it out. I said, now, they said it's human blood. We can tell that. They did whatever tests they need to do. And then I said, take some of the white blood cells and put them in a growth medium and keep them at body temperature for 48 hours. And they said, well, that'll do no good because it's dead blood. I said, would you please do that for me? And they said, okay, we'll do it. So anyway, I said, I want to be there when you take it out and examine it. So I was back there. They took it out, examined it under a microscope, and the one technician called the other one over there, and then they called the boss over there, and they were talking Hebrew a mile a minute there for a little bit, and they looked at me and they said, Mr. Wyatt, this human blood only has 24 chromosomes in it. Everybody else has 46. You see 23 from your mother, 23 from your father, 22 autosomes from your mother, 22 autosomes from your father. You get an X from your mother, you may get an X or a Y from your father, all right? This blood had 23 chromosomes from the mother's side, one Y chromosome only. You see, a child could not have developed if they hadn't had the autosomes from the mother. So all of his physical characteristics were determined by his mother's side of the family, her autosomes. His maleness was determined by this one Y that came from a source not a human male. Then they said, this blood is alive. And then they said, whose blood is this? I said, it's the blood of your Messiah. And I assure you, those men's lives have changed. You're welcome.
At that time, I was using a standard medical microscope, and while I could not see these particles, I knew they had to be there. I began to develop my own microscope patterned after the design of Professor Nason's. What you see behind me is that microscope in its latest stage of development. The microscope employs an extremely bright xenon or mercury light source, which can be combined with tungsten light. The light is directed across the microscopic specimen rather than on or through it in what is known as a dark field configuration. The light reflecting off the object is transmitted through the microscope and is magnified over 1,000 times. The image is then captured by a sensitive CCD camera and transmitted to a monitor for viewing at screen magnifications of up to 30,000x. Under these conditions, the tiny living particles can plainly be seen against a dark background. In 1996, my family and I made a trip to Nashville to visit the Wyatts. I brought along the microscope, which at that time was somewhat portable in its early stage of development, and set it up in the basement of the Wyatt's house. One evening, Mary Nell Wyatt asked me to take a look at some material from a burial cave to see if these tiny particles were present. Without my knowledge, one of the samples was actually the blood sample that Ron had taken from the Ark of the Covenant dig. The sample was placed under the microscope, and as the specimen began to come into focus, thousands of tiny particles, somatids if you will, became plainly visible. At that time, Mary Nell, who was standing behind me, began to weep. As I turned around and saw the expression on her face, I realized immediately that the sample we were looking at was actually the sample that Ron had found to be the blood of Christ. Okay, Mary Nell's going to take the sample and mix it with sterile water. And a test tube there that we've that'll be enough. And she's going to take some sterile water and a little bit, just some drops, all we need right now. And then okay, so now that we've got the sample on the slide, we'll go ahead and focus into the sample and see what comes up on the screen here. And there they are, thousands of living particles, less than a quarter of a micron in size. The spores are maybe a half micron, and but most of those little particles you're looking at is 17,000 X magnified on the screen 17,000 times. You know, in the Bible it tells us that the life is in the blood, and there's little living particles that most people are unaware that are there. And this is the same thing we see in living blood. The scientist in Canada says that these things never die. The blood may dry up, but these things, he says, they're indestructible, and he says they are the basis of life.
Dude, that is awesome. I mean, you can see it on the microscope screen. It's crazy because you're looking at ancient blood that's alive, still atoning for the mess up of man. So what I'm going to say is, these aren't things that you're going to find on the mainstream media. These aren't things that you're going to find through major religious systems, okay? Because the way the religious systems work is, if it didn't come through me, it's not true. And then that's what happens to the people. The people start to believe the same thing. It wasn't released officially by my organization, so it's not true, right? So we're just going to get all the scientists and all the Bible scholars to dismiss this man, this humble nobody who was just researching on his own with his sons. If you watch Ron Wyatt's stuff, you guys are going to know he's a genuine man. He was genuine at heart, and his sons are as humble as can be. They do interviews, his family. It's just amazing. Do your own research. Don't take for what other people give you as truth. Like, don't even listen to me. Do your own research, okay? I'm giving you my information based on my testimony, and I'm going to do a video on my testimony because most people don't really know the true me, right? They don't really know my whole story. They know the true me, but they don't know how in-depth is a video on my testimony after this. But guys, Ron Wyatt, the blood of the Messiah on a microscope screen, it's cool. I just want to share that with everybody. Build some faith, do your research, look at those archaeological discoveries that you can see with your eyes. And I'm actually going to do videos on his other discoveries too. So stay tuned, hit the subscribe button. I hope this is an encouraging word for you today.